And we're off.
Well,
Okay. Hey, everyone, and welcome to Chef AJ Live. I'm your host, Chef AJ, and this is where I introduce you to amazing people like you who are doing great things in the world that I think you should know about. Well, before I introduce today's guest, I want to tell you that whenever we have a doctor on the show, particularly this doctor, we get lots of questions. So really, not only the best way, but the only way to get your question answered is to submit it in advance. It's very easy to do so. Go to chefaj.com, subscribe to be on my newsletter, because once a week, either on Saturday or Sunday, we send you the guest lineup for the week. Simply respond to that email with who the question is for and the question, and you get to the top of the queue. Now, we have 10 questions today for Dr. Lisle, 5 that were left over from last time, 5 new ones. If by any miracle we get through them and get to the chat, please know we can only see your chat if you're watching on YouTube. If you watch on Facebook and Twitter, where we also stream this show just for convenience, we don't see what you type in the chat. So please consider watching on YouTube, where you can participate in the lively community chat as well as ask your questions. So without further ado, one of our very favorite guests, Dr. Lisle. Thank you so much for coming on. We love talking to you, Dr. Lisle. We get such a great response from the audience.
a pleasure. I can see you're at Rancho La Puerta. How cool is that?
Well, it's not cool because you're not here with me this time, but it's still pretty cool. All right. So without further ado, we'll jump into the first question. And this is from Renee. I understand that you began your friendship with Dr. Goldhamer when you were both young. Will you please tell us when you formed the ideas that led to writing The Pleasure Trap and how that developed? It is one of the most seminal works of the century. Is someone writing a biography on you? I often say that I keep your book chained to my body because it's so pivotal to my understanding and recovery.
Well, that's a big fan. Good, glad to hear it. Let's see. The ideas. I was actually teaching at Stanford in the early 90s, and I would sometimes drive up to True North, which was, Alan would always say, well, come on by. It's like, come on by. It's 2 hours up there and 2 hours back. You don't just come by. But Alan has no sense of direction. So, that's how that goes. So I would go up there once in a while. And one day Alan said, hey, you should just give a lecture. And I thought, I hadn't really spent hardly any time thinking about these problems. So this would have been about 1992. And I remember going into the kitchen there and thinking, okay, well, what do I think the fundamental problems are? And there was a framework in at sort of the elite level of social psychology, led by Richard Nisbett and Lee Ross. Lee Ross was a professor at Stanford. Nisbett was at the University of Michigan. And they had written a book called The Person in the Situation. Very, very interesting, academical book. And they talked about tension systems and channel factors. And they sort of went over and over these concepts, and they showed these concepts throughout different aspects of psychology. And the notion of tension system came out of the original thinking of the father of modern experimental social psychology, a man by the name of Kurt Lewin, back in the 1930s. And so Lewin's idea was essentially a fundamental shift away from conventional psychology, in the sense that the conventional psychology was that the motivation and why it is that people did things came sort of from within them, from their own pathologies and their own, the locus of human action was the personality of the individual. And Lewin basically said, no, I don't think so. I think that the situation that the person is in is enormously important. And so if you shift the situation, you're going to watch shifts in behavior. Now, obviously, both things are true, but the notion of the person sits at a nexus between their individual personality and the situational forces that surround them. And that if you're going to try to shift their behavior, the way to do it isn't to try to change their personality, is to change the situation around them. This became known as experimental social psychology, and Lewin invented it. Many of you will remember a TV program called Candid Camera with Alan Funt in the 1960s, where they set up these funny little situations for people, like, a door that won't open even though it just opened, or somebody walking by in diapers in the middle of Times Square, and and then everybody acting normal around them, but the one guy is like, what's going on? These the kind of setting up strange situations and seeing what happens to people can be really funny. But Alan Funt actually learned this from Kurt Lewin. Alan Funt had been a student of social psychology at, I believe, the New School for Social Research, or at Columbia, or wherever Kurt Lewin was a professor in the 1950s. And so that's actually how he figured out how to set up situations to cause interesting things. And so fast forward 30 years later, Lewin's influence over the field of psychology was immense. It gave birth to what we now know as social psychology, which is these interesting experiments that we do and see what people do in various situations. That gave rise, for example, to the famous Milgram study. So I'm actually a young prof there at Stanford, and Lee Ross is kind of my mentor. And so we go out to lunch once in a while, and I would go to his graduate seminar, and I'm going to read his brand new book called The Person in the Situation. And in that book, he and Nisbet, who I'd also met, these guys are talking about tension systems and channel factors. So they're talking very Lewinian, the notion that your behaviors sit embedded in a bunch of social tension. There's expectations, there's pressure, there's et cetera. And then channel factors was the notion that your behavior might have tremendous motivation, but if you can't get something done, you're getting stopped. Or that even though you may not have very much motivation to do something, if it's exceedingly easy to do it, then you're going to do it. A la the idea that if you hang around a barbershop long enough, you're going to get a haircut. So this is the notion of channel factors and tension systems. So tension is like all the pressure that's on you, and then channel factors is kind of like, is there a channel for the water to flow? If there's no channel for the water to flow, then essentially your motivation is being dammed up by an inability to get through. And whereas if there's a wide open channel, it doesn't take hardly any motivation at all to get something done. So I'm looking, as I'm looking at people sitting around waiting for me to speak at True North, that the lecture is going to start in 10 minutes. I, for the first time, turn my attention to the problem, and I come up with tension systems and channel factors. Okay, and I thought, there's more to it than that, because Lewinian field theory isn't going to be talking about what I knew, which is that rich food is tastier, junk food is tastier than normal fare. And so I come up with the concept of biological tension systems, social tension systems, and channel factors. Okay, so that becomes pleasure seeking, social pain avoidance, and energy conservation, several years later. So the very first lecture on the pleasure trap came whole heart out of my brain, literally in less than 2 minutes of planning, as I scanned through the framework that was bequeathed to me by Lee Ross and Richard Nisbet, all the way back through Lewinian field theory. So then it fiddles around in the back of my head, and I probably gave that lecture, every couple of months I drive up there and I give a lecture on what? Biological tension systems, social tension systems, and channel factors. Okay, so I did that probably 20 or 30 times, and then I have no idea that, but I do remember at True North at the old facility, one day drawing the picture of a shark and saying, why does the shark have teeth? And then from there, it became pleasure seeking, pain avoidance, and energy conservation. So the notion of energy conservation being the issue of channel factors turns out to be like, I recognize that channel factors is an interesting concept and it's an important one, but energy conservation is the more broadly subsuming underlying concept. And I dug that concept out of a particular page in the self-esteem that I had noticed that I had read years earlier. And I knew that it was a seminal principle of biology, but I had not, it took me a while to wed that to Lewinian channel factors. So there you go. And I think even if you see an early lecture on our website, probably my earliest lectures, I did one getting along without going along, way in the early days. You're going to see, I think, more closely Lewinian discussion there. You're going to hear me talk about the Milgram study and also a study by Howard Leventhal with respect to getting tetanus shots. In other words, I'm still steeped in experimental social psychology. These days, when AJ and I talk about things, we just talk about control your environment. We have distilled this down to AJ's phrase, if it's in the house, it's in your mouth. That is the story of tension systems and channel factors in one sentence. And so the biological tension is going to be pulling you because it's right there. The channel factor is it requires no energy to get it in your mouth. And so all of those concepts, were percolating through the 1990s and then culminate when we write The Trap. All right. All good, AJ. Come on back.
Yep, Dr. Lisle, there's a question can you give a for dummies explanation of what channel factors are?
Yeah, channel factor is something that opens or closes, making something able to access it. It's a channel. So this actually comes out of communication theory. So the notion is that you need a channel for information to go over. If you don't have a channel, then you can't. You can have a nice TV show, but if nobody can see it, then it's useless. It's getting stopped. So yeah, the notion is that channel factors are unbelievably important in determining human behavior because of the critical issue that's underneath of them, which is energy conservation, as well as something else, which is perceived probability of success. So if you feel like you can't get something done, you're getting blocked by a channel factor, you'll very often quit. This is exactly why when they do rebates, they make it a hassle for you to cut the little thing off the box and then post it on this thing. They know that with every channel factor they put on there, they massively reduce the likelihood that you're ever going to turn it in. So in a typical rebate situation, there'll be a $20 rebate on a $40 item, and everybody's like, "Wow, it's $20 off. I'm going to do that." It turns out less than 1% of people actually get their rebate because they make it little hassles for you to get it done. So that's the notion of channel factors. This is critical in programming for the internet because it turns out that every click that a person has to do in order to buy your product, it reduces your sales by 50%. So literally sloppy programming, and they're like, "No, have them go ahead and fill that out. Have them go ahead and do that. Will that be good for us?" It's like, "Oh, really? You just put in 2 more clicks. You just reduced your sales by 75% by adding those 2 clicks." So this is why it's important to be set up and organized in your house for healthy food. You want things, super easy so that you can execute on these things, i.e. have a wide open channel between your behavioral intentions and your action. That's the notion of channel factors.
I think about when you make a call and you have to press this number and then press this number. And then I just hang up because it's
Yeah. It's too much trouble and you quit. And that's and if we're not set up for success to reduce those down, it's going to be hard.
Yeah. Well, nice comment from Dr. Daryl. Woodruff Doug is absolutely brilliant.
Oh, He's one of our great favorites.
Yep. So here's a question from Anne. Dr. Lisle, I have long eaten better than my family or close friends. Since eating a whole food plant-based diet, one of my main objectives is to be a role model to family and friends. I saw your talk about wanting validation from others and having them kiss your feet. That led me to a eureka moment that perhaps I should stop putting myself out there as a role model to others and becoming a role model for myself, as I have yet to reach my health or weight loss goals. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think that my first thought about this is that first of all, we have an instinct to share information, and we have an instinct to attempt to earn esteem from sharing that information that makes us more valuable to the village. So it's understandable, and we have a high motivation to share this information because this information is really good, really unbelievably potentially useful, and therefore people would give us a lot of credit if they were to utilize it and succeed as a result. So we understand this intuitively, and therefore we've got a pretty high motivation for sharing this information. However, this information is going up against biological tension systems, social tension systems, and channel factors. Okay, it's my original explanation as to why this was difficult was that there was 3 major obstacles leveled against it, and we're going to call those pleasure-seeking, pain avoidance, and energy conservation. And so I would say that for most of us, most of the time, the last thing we need is actually the turbulence that comes from pushback from other people about what we're doing. In other words, what we actually, what we are probably best doing is, obviously, if there's someone close to you that is, that is suffering, and the thing to do is to open their eyes to the information once as a possibility, not vehemently with confidence, but tentatively with curiosity. In other words, hey, this seems like this is kind of interesting. I'm doing it. It seems to be helping me some. Yeah, you may want to look into it. And we direct them towards forks over knives or starch solution or whatever. Okay. So if they're interested in fasting, if you're like, hey, this is something that people do when they're in trouble with problems. Well, talk about True North, or we could talk about, Dr. Nathan Gershfeld's, fasting escape, which is a super convenient way for people to do this at home quite inexpensively, and help them get on a healthy track. So there's things that we can say, but then our thing to do is to just back away from it very quickly and have these be effectively non-issues. And I'm actually not looking to make some big example that I do things differently than anybody around me. Instead, I'm looking to just dovetail in and be as quietly unassuming as possible. So I have friends of mine who are not vegans, and I'll sit down with them and we'll go out to a restaurant, and they know I'm vegan, but the way I order and what I'm ordering is so unobtrusive. You know what I mean? It's just what anybody might order. It just so happens that it's vegan. And therefore, over time, these folks are, they know what it is how it is that I go on about doing things, but they don't feel self-conscious about it because I never raised the issue. Okay. So, maybe the first few times they're a little unsure, but by the 10th or 15th time, it's like, I'm just looking right past it, and I'm not making the slightest comment about anything even remotely related to food or health. And so now I put them to sleep with respect to that issue. So that's how I would recommend this, because quite frankly, as our questioner is discovering, it's hard enough to do it for yourself. It's hard enough to do it just all by yourself, for yourself. That's enough of a chore. And so to be dragging anything else into it, and then dragging in the tension in your own head of the embarrassment that you're not in that good of shape, and then what do they think, and then they're trying to decide, or they have arguments against you, and then you had a discussion last time and they said this because they heard that, and then they got a friend that's doing keto that looks better than you, so what is that? It's like, the hell with this. Like, I have no interest in it. My 99% of my interests are for me. That's where all of the attention goes. And then if there's 1% left over, then the people closest to me that I care most about, those people have heard the message, of course. But we can put those people on less than two hands. I can tell you, I had three of many of I've had a long-term partner, Melissa, who's still my best friend in the world, but she had 4 children that I half-assed raised from teenagers, and they were in my house. 3 of them lived with me. I'm 0 for 3. Okay, all 3 of them went vegan for a period of time, and then when all 3 of them then reverted to whatever it is that they want. Okay, so one of them got off, actually 2 of them largely got off dairy and helped some respiratory issues that they had, but they're not fastidious about it, but they sort of know that it's a controlling variable, and they pay attention to somewhat on that. But yeah, I'm actually my ex from 25 years ago that I was with for 13 years. Now, not vegan. It's like, wow, what's it take? Okay, what would like how much of an authority do you have to be, and how right do you have to be, and how obvious that you're right do you have to be? Answer is, I don't know. Okay, but I know that people kind of do their own thing and they go their own way, and so the right solution to this is 99% of your attention on yourself, 1% of your attention on people that are particularly important to you, and even then, we pedal it very softly. That's the right solution.
Okay, 0 for 3, Dr. Lisle. That's not very good.
There you go.
And you're Dr. Lisle. Okay, thanks. This is from Jacqueline. I'm almost 59 and I've gone back to school to get my first university degree. I'm going to be a social worker. I'd like to help people with life and wellness, and part of that would be to teach them this course if they're open. I think she's referring to the course we did together, the reboot, I'm guessing. Do either you or Chef AJ offer training or certification for individuals like myself? And does Dr. Lisle have any other suggestions for me? I want flexibility in my helping profession career and some financial freedom.
I'm not sure all what she's asking, but we don't do any sort of certification process, but there's certification processes that you can do. So, that's Cornell is probably the most famous one. I think that's a very good course. And so if you go through the Cornell course and you're certified there, it makes you feel like you've actually had a pretty sound introduction and knowledge base from which to counsel and share this information with the world. I mean, I think you would, if you take that course, then you feel like, okay, that's as good of an education in the field as exists at present in terms of a curriculum. So that's probably what I would have you do. And in terms of anything else, I'm not sure. What were some of our other questions, AJ?
Oh, sorry, I put it
No
away.
worries.
See, if you had any advice for her, suggestions for me. I want flexibility in my helping profession and some financial freedom.
Well, this is I think for most of us in the plant-based world, there are a few people that are here sort of full time, but most of us aren't. So, Dr. Scott Stoll is an orthopedic doctor. Dr. Stefan Esser is an orthopedic doctor. They're seeing people that have nothing to do with the plant-based world. And so, so most of us, I see when I'm talking to people all day long, I would say 70% of the people that I'm talking to, it has nothing to do with plant-based nutrition or their issues there. It has to do with relationships, general psychology. In other words, what I do as a psychologist, which is talk about kids, family, relationships, bosses, careers, and anxiety. In other words, it's got nothing to do with fruits and vegetables. So 30% of who I talk to is fruits and vegetables, i.e., I'm struggling with the pleasure trap. What do I do? So it's a component. So if you're going to be a social worker, understand that the counseling that you would do in this arena would be a part of your career, but it's likely to be a portion of it, and that your sort of day job is going to be the job of social work, which is going to be everything else. It's just like there's really no big difference in the world between social work and psychology. It's exactly the same process. Social workers get training in some resource knowledge of local communities and how to find help for people in a way that can be very useful. Psychologists don't get that training. Psychologists get training in doing testing. It's like, whatever. I haven't given anybody a test in 35 years, so that didn't amount to much. But mostly what we do is just counsel, and so that's what you're going to be doing. And it's nice to have knowledge of how to counsel people around these issues, because some people come in and they don't know anything about this, and they're actually struggling with some important issues where this could be useful. Now, and once again, how are we going to sell it? Gently, you know what I mean? And not with a heavy hand, because they're not likely to bite on it, but they might. And so you will have a few wins. One of my first wins was a guy that came in, who was sent by a psychiatrist because supposedly he had it all in his head that he had all this joint pain. Hilarious. Okay. And so I said, do you eat dairy products? Of course. And I said, get rid of all your dairy products and, for a month, and then your pain will probably go away. He thought I was he told me later, he thought I was a nut, but incredibly, he did it. And his pain was gone in 2 days. So you will, by knowing this information, you will have beautiful little wins that, people will find you valuable and useful, and you can just build your practice from there. But yeah, that's how it's going to work. The whole Whole Foods plant-based arena is a nice arena to talk to people that are motivated to do healthy living and may want some direction and knowledge. And so, it's an additional thing to do for your career. Don't plan on making it your whole career. There's too many other things to do. You could. There's a few people out there that have made it literally their whole careers, but not many. Most of us are more broad-ranging practitioners, and that's how it's probably going to work out.
Thank you. Two questions on the internal audience. The first one from Jay. Is the internal audience the same thing as your conscience? Is it the voice that says it's okay to have another cookie? Is it a gut feeling? How do I differentiate all the voices in my head? Which one do I trust? Is worry and anxiety associated with the audience? Is depression simply the result of the lack of excellence in behavior or choices? Does confidence come from the internal audience? Lots of questions in there.
Lots of questions. And this person might want to sign up for the Living Wisdom Library. In the Living Wisdom Library, Jen Howk and I actually have about 4 hours of educational video where we've shot video and broken it down into, 30 something little small 10, 15-minute modules or less, where we explain little components of the inner workings of how it is that the mind works. So this guy has a whole slew of questions there that would, to honestly, to do it justice, would take me quite a lot of time to sort of spell it all out. You could call your conscience in essence a component of the internal audience, or a feature that derives from an internal audience. I think that's a fair description. The internal audience is a bit more comprehensive than that. In other words, the internal audience is actually observing your efforts, and a lot of times those efforts don't have any kind of a moral derivative that you would quote call conscience. So the value of describing this process as an internal audience gives us an understanding of the psychological mechanics that are actually taking place there. So it's as if other people are watching us, and what would they think of the behaviors that we're doing. And so on the one hand, if they were morally wrong, we would feel the censure, i.e. a feeling of conscience. However, suppose that they were simply observing us, and they were watching us do kind of a half-assed job, that wouldn't be morally despicable. It just wouldn't be impressive in terms of, we wouldn't be impressed with our effort. And so that is the internal audience's workings when it comes to the feeling that I call self-esteem. Okay, so the workings of the internal audience's judgment of you will result in the feelings that we call self-esteem, whether it's high or low. In other words, your self-esteem, what you are feeling about yourself, is on a wide continuum from I'm just totally disgusted with myself, which could be even worse if it was not only a mediocre performance or effort, but also if it was morally despicable. You see, so if we added a conscience aspect to it, then the self-esteem could be devastatingly low as a result of something that you did it poorly and you did it wrong. Okay, those people that don't have those negative feelings, those are sociopaths. As far as they're concerned, they're fine. They don't have a problem with what they just did to you. So anyway, but these are sort of interesting little mechanics. Now, the person also asked about depression. Depression is the result of failure feedback, where our efforts that we have been attempting to obtain a goal have fallen short, and we are disappointed because we expected ourselves to be more successful. And so that depression could be a very devastating depression, because we really expected a very substantial prize, and it turned out that that isn't happening. So you can see, for example, let's suppose we went to a doctor and we had a little lump, you know what I mean, under our arm, and our friend who was a physician said, I have it checked out, but I'm pretty sure that's just a cyst. Okay, so we go there and they actually check it out, and we've got a malignancy. Notice how you feel. Okay, you're like, whoa, the disappointment and anxiety. And now, and as we find out bad news, we're feeling depressed. Why? Because it's a big loss. Okay, if things are way worse than we thought they were. Okay, so that's what depression is about. Depression is about that things are worse than we thought they were going to be, and we are also not confident that we can fix it. Okay, so a big part of treating depression is to have people understand and learn what would be the stepping stones from here in order to improve the situation, in order to get closer, get feedback that's more consistent with what they thought that they could accomplish or should be able to accomplish. And so that's how you do it. And there's there's aspects to that in everybody's depression case, but yeah, depression, they said, they made some comment about, is it just this or that? I can't remember, about the internal audience. And the answer is, the internal audience is involved here, but it is not actually the major player when it comes to our how is that, whether we're depressed or not. The major player in whether we're depressed or not is the feedback that we are receiving from our predominantly our social environment. In other words, whether we are objectively succeeding or failing in our attempts to earn and keep esteem from others. So the self-esteem mechanism is a component of how it is that we feel, but it is not actually the loudest voice in the room. The loudest voice in the room is, did we succeed or fail? And that is so you could have done a good boyfriend and you did a good job and you did everything right, and you look at your performance as a boyfriend to Susie and you felt like you did you did what you could, but you got dumped. So how do you feel? Depressed. That's what you feel. Okay. Not even though you look back and examine your own behavior and you're like, I think I did as good a job as I could do. And you very likely did. So your self-esteem is perfectly sound, but your esteem, i.e. you got dumped, that is devastating and you're going to be depressed behind it. So that's how that works. All right.
Great. Thank you. Another question on the internal audience from Jennifer. My internal audience has become dysfunctional in a hypercritical manner. I ruminate on perceived mistakes that may or may not have happened, led to a missed opportunity. I dance the would've, could've, should've choreography repeatedly. The missed opportunity does not matter in my current life circumstances. These thoughts serve no positive purpose. Do you have advice on how to stop ruminating on something that in the big picture doesn't matter, but that continually disrupts equilibrium and overall peace of mind?
Yeah, you didn't just become this way. You've been this way your whole life. You came out of a womb like this, okay? This is a personality characteristic. So this is not something that you learn. So no, the answer is you're a hyper-conscientious nut, and there's really nothing to be done about it. And you lived your whole life with it, and you're going to go to your grave with it. Now, so the question is, what can you do? Well, the best things that you can do for just the general suffering of the hyperconscientious is to try to get as much social, control over your social ecology as possible, and even your physical ecology. So these people tend to be relatively environmentally sensitive because they're actually very live wire nervous systems. So therefore, it's a useful thing to try to live under quiet circumstances, for example, not have a lot of loud friends, and essentially, try to be as insulated as possible from general emotional upheaval of the world. So that's one thing. Sometimes people like this can have their mind has a hard time getting a break because it's constantly calculating and constantly circling back over and ruminating over possible mistakes that need to be remedied. So sometimes it's useful to listen to very soothing music, just to actually distract the brain and make it impossible for it to do that job. So, I have people like listen to George Winston or Enya to just like chill out quietly with some earphones on from time to time, and just look at pretty pictures on a television screen as you have a screensaver that looks at all the pretty places in the world, and to listen to that pleasant music. In other words, occasionally find ways to distract that brain from getting focused and being able to run all these ruminative calculations. I'm trying to think what else. Not too much you can do. Sometimes these folks have open loops where they've got a specific thing that they're being troubled by, and that they're sort of cycling around this over and over again. Sometimes that getting consultation with somebody who is clever about this, like myself or Jen, we can sometimes convince your adapted mind that it is looking at it through the wrong lens. What doesn't work is psychotherapy. So psychotherapy, talking about these things, processing it, trying to figure out where it comes from and what you can do about it, that's a total waste of time. This is personality. Okay, this is like trying to talk an extrovert into being an introvert, or an introvert being into extrovert, or a very closed person into being open, or a very open person into being closed. Cannot be done. So this is sort of who you are, and your best moves are to try to arrange your social ecology and physical ecology to be as pleasant as possible, to try to give yourself the best possible ride. That's it.
Great. Thank you. Here's a question on weight loss drugs from Debbie.
Mhm.
Several of my coworkers and an acquaintance are taking weight loss medications, Adipex, Suprenza, Qsima, Contrave, etc. Never heard of any of them.
Mhm.
And having a lot of success as they no longer want to overeat. I still struggle with the pleasure trap and am carrying an extra 20 pounds, although I have lost about 60 pounds in the past decade. I keep feeling jealous, and I'm actually starting to consider seeing if I qualify for one of these medications. Wouldn't the benefits and esteem I get from getting to a thinner weight outweigh the risks of these drugs? I'm 52 with no known health issues aside from hypothyroidism. If it really is not a good idea to take one of these drugs, how do I manage the jealousy? I feel others are cheating to be thin.
That is a golden question, AJ. We ought to put that one in bronze. That's so good. First of all, any medication that would be so impactful as to take 20 pounds off a person, to me, is you're playing Russian roulette with your health. So this is exactly the kind of crap that they find out 5 years later. They find out that a whole bunch of people have died of heart attacks and strokes as a result of this crazy ass medication. Okay, so God forbid, it's carcinogenic, but oh no, it didn't show up on the little trial of 480 people. Well, of course it didn't. You didn't follow them for 20 years, so we have no idea what this does. So there's no way in hell that I would ever take any medication for anything that even remotely like this. If you've got some nasty chronic pain in your feet and the doctor says, you know what, we got nothing else for you but Neurontin, and you take a little bit of Neurontin and it turns out your life is better. Okay, there's a time and place for medications, of course, but not weight loss, for God's sakes. That you're in there trying to cause gross morphological change in your body. What on earth is involved in that? The answer is nobody knows. And anybody that is using these medications and saying, oh no, they passed our clinical trial safety, they're totally lying. They have no idea what the long-term effects are. Okay. So square one is there's no way in hell that I would ever sign off on anybody doing anything like that. Okay. So there's one. So then the question is, your friends are cheating. Oh, well, so they're cheating. So your job is the 20 pounds that are upsetting you. Well, what are you going to do about that? I.e., do the same thing about that. In other words, that we get the ancillary benefit for being a lot healthier. So, you're 52 years old. We're trying to have a really good next 40 years, maybe 50 if you're Alan and you're ambitious. So, but the point is that we're wanting to have as good a life as possible. And if you're struggling with the pleasure trap a little bit, and that's what's causing us to be 20 pounds overweight, I mean, Alan would say, hey, good, you've got a feedback system that's telling you you're not doing such a good job. Okay, so, and it's a motivating feedback system. So I would say that, if you've dropped 60 pounds, you have done an exceptionally good job. You have basically, you've come 3/4 of the way. Okay, and the last quarter is, you have the least motivation for it, is part of the problem. So, going back to, biological systems, social tension systems, and channel factors. I mean, we are at social tension systems where it's not that bad being 20 pounds overweight, and it's, we're not quite willing to fight the biological tension system of getting super clean. And so we're just not doing it. And I don't blame anybody for that at all. In other words, I understand fully the extraordinary value of doing something 3/4 right, and that's good. It's a really good job. However, the in terms of the last quarter, you're going to see people all over the place cheating, quote, trying to cheat nature, and it's troublesome to try to cheat nature. So if you start to talk to people that have had bariatric surgery, I've talked to a lot of people that will just sing the praises of that bariatric surgery for the first 2 years. And then, let's see them 5 years later. It's like it's a disaster. So and certainly people will use Strattera for their ADHD, and they'll tell you, oh my God, I'm so much better than I was before. It's like, yeah, nah, I don't think so anymore. So we had a short-term positive effect from that Strattera. And now you're basically a speed addict and you can't get off of it, and you can't, you're in trouble, you're in a trap. So, cheating nature, trying to weasel our way around, of course it's understandable. And once in a while, modern medicine comes up with a hack. They get around things. And so, let's face it, I'm really glad there's such a thing as a root canal, because otherwise I'd have teeth rotting out of my head, a couple of them by now. So there's a time and place for medical intervention. 20 pounds overweight, facing down the last mile of the pleasure trap. No, this is not a time for medical intervention. This is a time to, sort of stare at the problem and run an experiment on the cost benefit analysis about whether or not this is worth doing. Okay. So you probably have never run that experiment. So there it sits right out over your horizon. Okay, there it is. So, maybe you can't get yourself to do it. Maybe you need to get there more quickly, and you need to drop 10 of these pounds so that you can see what it feels like. Okay? Talk to Nathan Groschfeld at Fasting Escape. Do it at home. Doesn't have to be some big, expensive, fancy process. You're 52 years old. You're quite healthy. No health issues. You're a prime candidate for that. Okay. And now suddenly, you're down 10 pounds and your palate's a little sharper, and you've actually cooked the food clean to break your own fast. So you're up the learning curve. Okay. Now you're in a position to see what that feels like and whether or not it's worth defending. So that's how I would tell you to approach this. And in terms of your jealousy, oh, well, people are going to cheat like hell all over life. You know what I mean? So such is life. They are not, the little people around you are not your only competitors. They're, and if you're frustrated enough about it, just do a better job. Just do the thing right and earn the self-esteem and the confidence that you are treating your body immaculately. Do it the right way. And I think that at least do it the right way and see if it's worth it to you. That's what I would tell you to do.
Well, that was wonderful, Dr. Lisle. And speaking of cheating nature, the next question is actually on breast implants. So it's Natalie, and she wants to know, why are guys attracted to women who obviously have undergone a lot of beauty surgeries, like having breast implants, butt implants, Botox, lip fillers, nose jobs, and also who wear lots of makeup and have hair extensions to hide their naturally thin and unhealthy hair? Don't guys see it's all fake, or do they not care because the girls look hot and beautiful to them? Isn't the reason we mate because we want their genes? Don't they want to maximize the chances of healthy offspring? The offspring probably won't be so pretty naturally if their mom isn't. So they won't have good genes, thus competing will be more difficult for them unless they do beauty surgeries as well, like their mom. Could Dr. Lisle please explain what's going on here?
Oh my God, that's a really interesting question. That's a beat your genes question if I ever heard one. Yeah, the truth is that this is going to be what we call an arms race. And so arms races typically, take place over evolutionary time, so that what you're finding is that characteristics, people are competing with each other, and they evolve characteristics to try to display gene quality. And so that's what secondary sexual characteristics are in animals. So in humans, long, big, thick, lustrous hair, curvaceous figure in women, big, strong upper body strength in men, facial configurations of symmetry and accentuated testosteronization or feminization, etc. So we are in arms races naturally for those things. Of course, then it makes sense that people, being the handy creatures that they are, with these opposable thumbs and incredible coordination and great imaginations, they figured out how to cheat. They've been cheating for a long time, people. We have, I think, maybe the oldest known cosmetic kit that has ever been excavated was like 3,500 years old. It's pretty sophisticated. So people have been at this for a long time, and of course the reason is that it works. If it didn't work, if you couldn't fool people with powders and paints and hair extensions, etc., then it wouldn't fly. But it turns out that people have not evolved detection mechanisms to look past some increasingly sophisticated interventions. So yeah, I can understand that it's frustrating looking around and seeing your competitors cheat like hell, but hey, it is what it is. There's not anything that anybody could do about it. And so it's going to, that's, I always call the Macy's cosmetics counter the male defrauding counter. That's what it is. That's why the women are in there. They're in there to defraud the male brain. And their attitude is, I have to, all my competitors are doing it. And of course, from my standpoint, it's like, hey, fair enough. I have absolutely no objection for any of this sort of thing. However, the problem starts when we take out the surgical knife and start hacking people apart. It's like, okay, well, now you're doing some other things, and now everybody has to actually take their own chances with changing their own bodies unnaturally with the surgeon's knife. And I think that it is, I don't think it's a terrible thing. I think it's a scary option for people, and it's an expensive option in terms of the risks that you take. But this is life. Okay, life is about taking risks and weighing for yourself what the cost and benefit is of various options. These options now exist. They're not going anywhere. They're going to continue to be part of human culture indefinitely. And the answer is no. We have not evolved detection mechanisms to see around them. Okay, that is the entire point. So well-constructed makeup actually makes, for example, it makes women look like they are physically aroused. That is the point to the makeup. Okay, and therefore the male brain is looking at characteristics that make him think that the woman is aroused. If the woman is aroused and looking at him, it makes him believe that she thinks that he's hot. Okay, and therefore, if he thinks that she thinks that he's hot, then she just became a hell of a lot more interesting physically, because his perceived probability of successful mating just went up. Okay, so you see how complicated the interplay is there, and what the makeup is actually doing. So she may not be thinking that consciously at all. In fact, she's not thinking that consciously. She's just thinking, hey, I look prettier with makeup on. The men give me more attention. and my competitors all have it, so I can't be left behind. Okay, that's all that's going on inside of her head. She doesn't know what a complicated interplay and set of tricks that is. And so, no, the male brain is not designed to look past it at all. The very ruse that is being used, was arrived at through millions of experiments with women with different paints. I always think it's kind of interesting to see some girl with, I don't know, green lipstick or something. That's just a chick that is so open that she obviously has no idea how this works. And the truth of the matter is, no, it needs to be red lipstick, people, because that's what happens under sexual arousal. Okay, so anything else ain't gonna fly, or you're gonna be sending just a message that I'm a freak. Okay, is what you're doing, and maybe that works, for a certain marketplace, but it's not hitting the general market. The general market is that makeup needs to be red. Okay, that's what it is, and the rouge and everything needs to be a blush that is indicating that you are blushing. Okay, why are you blushing? Because you're sexually aroused. Okay, that's how this works. And so, yeah, I understand that all of us are face evolutionary arms races. Men and women face these arms races. Women have it more intensified on them. Men have their own arms races having to do with achievement that they're having to run, and they have to do sometimes they're doing some dangerous things. Any young guy without great prospects that joins the military and does dangerous things, he's being goaded into an evolutionary arms race in order to compete, where he otherwise doesn't feel like he's in very competitive circumstances to get a hold of resources. So he's going to go do very risky things, including risk his life, in order to try to get a competitive advantage. So you see that these things are not trivial processes, and so they're hard on people, as competition is.
Dr. Lisle, Angie wants to know if those strategies work on you, or do you see right through them?
Let me think about that. I would say I read a social psych article. I think it was an experiment that was done way back in the 1980s. I think it was done, I forget where it was done. It seems like it was done in maybe Phil Zimbardo's lab at Stanford or something. I can't remember. But it was the use of a female grad student, in running a psych experiment, that either put a little bit of makeup on, or I think it was a little bit of makeup and also a little bit of perfume. Okay, and that versus a grad student that put on a ton of makeup and perfume versus no makeup and no perfume. And it turned out that a little bit of makeup and perfume was the most appealing. And the thinking is that the woman is quietly signaling that she is actually mate seeking, but she is not being loud about it, and that whatever else would go on with going full battle regalia is possibly seen by the male as, okay, well, you're advertising too loudly, maybe I'm gonna have too much competition, or you're narcissistic enough that bothers me. So yeah, it turns out that the typical undergraduate male also was found it also not appealing when the woman used no makeup and no scent. In other words, i.e., I'm not trying to attract anybody, I'm completely disinterested. So it turns out that I read that and I thought, isn't that interesting? That is exactly how my mind works. Okay, so my mind was tracking the males in that study perfectly. That is exactly how I respond. So if I go out with somebody and if they had no makeup, no indication that they were trying to be appealing at all, then I would feel flat about it, like, oh, well, you're just completely disinterested, not on any market at all. Okay, that is exactly what I would be thinking. And if I went out with somebody who was all gussied up, I would be feeling like, for me, that's sort of too loud. And I don't understand it. And it's not sort of part of a personality that would fit my personality. So it would be essentially, the thing, what was most appealing was tomboyish with a little bit of makeup. That was that was what flew. And, I think that's about where I am.
Great, thank you.
50 years later.
Dr. Lisle, just wanted to comment that when you were talking about the weight loss drugs, one of the live viewers said that they have heart damage from taking fen-phen.
Yep, that's right. And so all kinds of people, a lot of people lost their lives behind fen-phen. And a lot of people lost a lot of portions of their lives behind fen-phen. So God knows, anything, it's kind of the notion of, if people say, what got this cream for my face? It's like, well, what happens when you take it off? Well, nothing. Okay. Well, then my attitude is it's probably pretty benign. Okay. What about this drug that I take that's going to have me lose 20 pounds? It's like, whoa, what the hell is that? The answer is whatever that's doing, it's doing something very big and very bold and very aggressive, which means it's exceedingly likely to have side effects all over the place that they're not cataloging. Okay, so that's my general idea. Put on eyeshadow. What do I think of that? Well, when you take it off, do your eyes hurt? No. Okay, then we're probably fine. Take a pill and lose 20 pounds. Look out. You're courting very serious danger. So that's my attitude.
It's interesting, Dr. Lisle, I don't control who sends in questions and what they're about, but so many of them really are about fooling Mother Nature today.
There you go. Sure. Well, I understand. People are, this is a largely, our arena, even though people are very interested in their health, they're also very interested in their appearance, as they should be. And so therefore, weight loss becomes an incredibly central feature of our modern environment because of the pleasure trap. And so of course people are frustrated with the competitive problems involved there and their own self-esteem about this. So there's no surprise that people are always looking around trying to figure out how to solve a problem that is exceedingly difficult to solve. And the only good news that we have is we've actually got it solved. Okay, there is a solution. The solution is a hassle. It's frustrating. It takes self-discipline, takes effort, takes work, takes opening up channel factors, takes self-discipline, takes knowing how it is that you're going to manage the social pressure. A lot of problems, okay? But the good news is it's solvable. That's the good news. The first thing I ever happens in my mind when I'm talking to anybody about any problem in their life, but my very first thing that my mind goes is the problem solvable? Okay, that's my first question. And if my answer to that is, gee, I'm not sure, then I feel the weight of, I'm not sure that now we are working for the best solution. We are not working for a certain solution. So now you've got some cancer, okay? Okay, I'm not sure that we can solve it, but all we can do is we can work towards the very best solution. We want the best information, the best consult, and the best direction for you. That's what we do, because we can't say that we can just get rid of it because we don't necessarily have the solution. Okay. So, you've got a child and that child is really ADHD and they're real bouncing off the walls and they're real frustrated. It's like, okay, we don't necessarily have a solution. What we have is a best possible solution. That's what we're working for. Okay. But when someone says I'm 20 pounds overweight, I have the solution. Okay. There is a solution. So now the fact that the solution is inconvenient, that it's a hassle, a solution is, gee, I hate living with my parents and I'd really like to be off on my own, but I don't have any money. Really? There's 80 hours a week you could be working at Taco Bell and saving every nickel. So there is a way out of your problem. Okay. So in other words, as long as there's a way out, I relax. And now we're just talking about how elegantly and easily we can solve it. But there's a difference between can we solve it or not solve it. And the beauty of so many of health problems and fitness problems and personal presentation problems around weight is, oh, it is absolutely solvable. The only question is, how much do we want to do it? And that's the story.
Right. Dr. Lisle, I read that makeup originated in ancient Egypt, and I wonder, was that Cleopatra's motivation for wearing makeup, you think?
Who knows? I'm sure that's true. I don't know that it originated there. I think that's where the original, that 3,500-year-old makeup kit was found, was in Egypt. But I have no doubt that it didn't somehow spontaneously, wasn't just in Egypt. We have such sketchy records for anything that happened 10,000 years ago. I have no doubt that women were braiding their hair and using little reddish stuff, little reddish dyes from food and blackberries and things like that, and strawberries. I have no doubt that makeup it goes back 50,000 years. I think that this is and probably longer.
Wow. Dr. Lisle, we've gotten through 80% of the questions. There's 2 more. We could either stop now, you could take one of them, you could both of them, whatever you. Okay, great. One is on precognitive dreams and one is on personality. Do you have a preference which one I go with?
Precognitive dream. I've never heard that phrase before in my life. Let's hear what they're asking.
Okay, great. It's a little bit long, so I'll read it really fast, and it's from Renata. I'm a 31-year-old female. All my life, I've had very vivid precognitive dreams, and I think I'm clairvoyant. For example, I dreamt that I would be accepted to grad school in 3 years, and exactly what school, long before I even knew I wanted to go to grad school. Exactly 3 years later, I got accepted to that same exact school for the same program as in my dream. I also dreamt of a random man who I did not know or ever saw before. I could remember his exact physical appearance when I woke up. The next day, I saw that exact man in the grocery store. I also dreamt of another man that I've never seen before. A few days later, I saw a picture of the same man on a dating app. I could sense his negative energy in the dream, so I ignored the messages. I also dreamt that my coworkers, who I didn't speak to at the time, husband was having an affair. I told her, and it turned out to be true. I dreamt that my friend's aunt, who I didn't know, would get cancer and would later die. And this is what happened. When I was in school, I dreamt of the questions that were going to be on the exam the night before. Those questions showed up on the exam. When my grandmother was in the hospital, I dreamt of 3 figures dressed in white who I thought were angels, who told me she would get well and be just discharged the next day, and that is what happened. These are a few examples of many examples of when my dreams have predicted the future. Happened too many times to just be a coincidence. Interestingly, I had consulted a psychic a few years ago asking what career I was destined to be doing, and without knowing anything about me or my premonitory dreams, she said that I am psychic and clairvoyant and that I should be doing readings for people. I am physically and mentally healthy and don't take and never took any medications, drugs, or alcohol. How does evolutionary psychology explain these precognitive dreams?
I'm not going to bother. Just send me your stock market picks and we'll see how you do in the next year. All right. Let's go to the next question.
Okay, well, all right. How do you really feel? All right. So this next question is on personality. When exactly is it formed? Is it right when the baby is born or already in the womb? If personality is genetic, does this mean that the eating behavior of an expectant mother or C-section doesn't alter a baby's personality? But if it was true that drinking certain amounts of coffee or alcohol during pregnancy does alter a baby's personality, would the offspring maybe not be as emotionally unstable, disagreeable, and an HCNC?
Okay, the way developmental embryology works, and that's what the person is actually asking. In other words, there's a process by which you go from a fertilized egg into a full adult. So in a human, that's going to take 20, 25 years. So there's a process. What this is that the genes are effectively like an incredibly complicated recipe. And so they're getting materials from your food, and they're unzipping and then building a little protein, and then and then the local environmental conditions of the cells alter what's going on. So, for example, if you're getting a bunch of sun, then you're going to have to unzip some more things and then defend yourself by getting tan, etc. So there's it's an immensely complicated process. So the brain is being built a little bit at a time over, 25 years, for God's sakes. So the personality is going to be a lot of the characteristics of it's literally the physical differences in the brains between two individuals. And those physical individual differences of the brains are the result of almost entirely of the genetic code. In other words, the food, just as what some kids' facial configurations look like when they're 6 years old, it has nothing to do with what his mother ate in the womb. It has to do with the genes. You can see that they look like their mom. Okay, so Christy Brinkley's kid looks like Christy Brinkley's kid, doesn't look like Dana DeVito's kid. Okay, so this is, it didn't matter that they ate Pop-Tarts instead of eating rice. It didn't make any difference. It's like you could see that the bone structure is caused by how the genes were built. Now, the skin condition, kids eating a bunch of chocolate, we may have little superficial stuff that's going on, but the underlying bone structure, that's the kid. Okay, now, so personality is like the bone structure of the person's body. In other words, it's going to, but just as the bone structure of the kid's body, you can't tell what it's going to look like when it's 18 months old. You'll get a lot better look at it when the kid's 9. And even then, you won't be exactly sure what that kid's going to look like when they're 18 or 19. Okay, so you may have a kid that's perfectly proportioned and looks like a model at 9, but then it gets kind of funny looking and the legs get longer than the rest of the torso. And now you don't exactly have a nice looking kid, but it's a little bit funny looking kid, when they're 20. What happened? Okay, nothing bad happened there. It just those are just the nature of the genes. So that's what's happening with personality. So the brain is developing just like the rest of the body, and it's going through a process of immensely complex recipe processes, and you will eventually see what it is that it becomes when it's a young adult. Okay, and quite frankly, you're gonna have an incredibly good look at what that personality looks like, by the time it's 12 or 13 years old. But there are still some mysteries as to how the genes are going to be turning on and off as it continues to develop the last components of the brain and develops forebrain bundles and, et cetera. In other words, we still don't know quite what this is going to look like. We've got a really good look at it, but we don't have the complete picture exactly. Okay, so that's how that works. Just like when Michael Jordan was cut from the varsity team as sophomore or freshman or whatever it was, and the coach is taken some heat for that, and he says, listen, he was a pretty good player, but he was only 6 foot tall. He wasn't 5'10" or something. It's like, well, the next year he sprouted up to 6'5". It's a whole different story now. Of course, okay. So nobody knew that extra 5 or 6 inches was sitting in that side of that genetic code. We didn't see it until that year happened. Then it happened. Okay. So anyway, that's how the genes work. And so now it was in the genetic code at conception that Michael was going to have a growth spurt, at that age. Like that was in the genetic code. He didn't know it. Nobody knew it, but it was sitting right in there, and it was going to happen as a part of the developmental process of that particular genotype. Mine didn't. I kept waiting, kept looking at my little average sized parents like, come on. Sure, I want to be able to dunk a basketball, so I'd sure like to be like Jerry West and he's 6'3". Well, it didn't happen. You just sat right there and watched the grass grow, and there it sat. That's genes. So that's how it is. Now, the question about food or diet or what happens if a kid, if mom drinks alcohol, is that going to make a difference? Well, the question would be if the parent is consuming a neurotoxin. Okay, so if the parent is consuming a neurotoxin, at enough level that it's damaging the body of the individual and damaging their nervous system, then you can wind up with a compromised mental function, not only personality, i.e., not only its emotional structure, but also its physical structure. You can actually make it less able to run calculations, less able to see. In other words, you can damage the hell out of a brain with neurotoxins, okay? So the question is, how much of a neurotoxin is a modest amount of alcohol during pregnancy? The answer is probably not at all. In other words, there'd probably be no influence whatsoever of a child's functioning in adulthood. What about a lot of alcohol? Well, how much? You know what I mean? So now we don't know. And so it's going to turn out that once in a while, if a mom uses a tremendous amount of alcohol, you can wind up with fetal alcohol syndrome. You can wind up with some really nasty damage. But that's what you're looking at is damage done to the system. Okay, you're not looking at biasing the developmental process in some bizarre way. You're like if you use caffeine, you're not going to make the kid more peppy or, you know, et cetera, more interested in having caffeine later. No. The question is the neurotoxin sufficient to damage enough neural tissue that the brain cannot recover? The answer to that is usually no, but it could. So, you know, you can have crack babies that, you know, you can have permanent damage that is severe. So the overwhelming majority of people that you're going to see, and you're going to see their functioning, nothing happened in child development that resulted in them being a certain way. Okay. In other words, what you are watching, it was the inevitable byproduct of the development of that personality through its brain and body development. So, you know, there was nothing about Michael Jordan's mother in behavior in the womb and the food that they ate at the table that resulted in a ferociously competitive, driven super athlete. There was no way to create that. That was sitting inside the genetic code. Okay. And that's going to be true of your kids' personalities and their behavior. That is sitting inside of the genetic code. And what you eat, whether you eat meat, you know, one of the fantasies out there in vegan land is that when people eat meat, they're more aggressive. No, they're not. You know, if you eat meat when your kid is developing, they're going to be more aggressive. No, they're not. And it's got nothing to do with it. So, you know, what you eat is not influencing your personality. What you eat will not influence your kid's personality. You know, whether you like to jump on a trampoline when you're early in your pregnancy, that's not going to make your kid enjoy, you know, roller coasters more, etc. None of that happens. So the genes are extremely exacting and precise in terms of the structures that they build, and they are almost uninfluenceable by environmental inputs, and they can be influenced in a way that they could be damaged. Okay, that is how that can happen. But damage is very difficult to do because the genetic code defends the hell out of itself. It is the most high fidelity copying information system that there is. Okay, so it is extremely well defended against error. So no worries and no hope. So you're not going to make your kid a baby Einstein from, you know, I don't know, eating extra fish to get their more essential fatty acid for their brains. Not going to happen.
Hey,
Right.
Dr. Lisle, I thought you might want to know you ruffled a few feathers with your previous answer. I'm guessing you just don't believe in psychics and clairvoyance.
No, I don't. Okay, so and this person with the immense string of coincidences, like I said, you know, pick me a few stocks. So I'm happy to you know, have yourself a clairvoyant dream about the stock market, and then write it down and send it to me in advance so that I can make bets on it. And at the end of a year, we'll look back and see how your picks were. Okay. And that's how we do it. In other words, if we're going to test that sort of clairvoyance, then the way to do it is to actually tell me what the predictions are, and then we will then see whether or not it actually came to pass. Don't tell me after the fact. I have all kinds of things that I could tell you that after the fact that I predicted. Okay, so no, the key is to do it in advance. Okay, then tell me and report on it, and then we'll see. Okay, so that's how we do it. All right.
Well, this was sure a lot of fun, Dr. Lisle. Thank you so much. It's always just a real treat to have you answer our questions.
All grand, folks. Great to see you, AJ.
Right. And somebody wants to know if they could watch you and Dr. Goldhamer play basketball when you're 90.
Oh, well, we hope so. We hope so. We'll see how we do.
Maybe we could do a live. Maybe I'll still be broadcasting in another 30 years.
We should do that at 65, so we still look pretty good. So we'll see. We'll see how that works.
We'd love it. Thanks again, Dr. Lisle.
Right,
thanks
AJ.
all of you. Thank you. And thanks all of you for watching another episode of Chef AJ Live. Please come back tomorrow when my guest is Dr. Juan Rice, who will be answering your